They said his name only once. And after that, no one ever said it again. Because saying his name reminded them of something uncomfortable. Something buried. Something they were never supposed to talk about. But before everything collapsed. Before the accusation. Before the silence. He was just a man who believed the system worked. Ethan Carter was not powerful. He wasn't rich. He didn't come from influence or legacy. He believed in rules. In order. In doing the right thing even when no one was watching. That belief would cost him everything. At 34, Ethan had what most people call a quiet success. A stable job at a private financial consulting firm in Chicago. A small apartment with clean windows and no luxury. A fiancée who trusted him completely. And a reputation built slowly, patiently, over years. People described him with words like reliable. Predictable. Safe. No one ever called him dangerous. And that was the mistake. Because the most dangerous men are not the ones who shout. They are the ones who observe. It started with a promotion. Not a dramatic one. No corner office. No applause. Just a quiet internal decision that placed Ethan closer to sensitive accounts. Closer to numbers that didn't belong to him. Closer to secrets. At first, he didn't notice anything wrong. The irregularities were subtle. Tiny inconsistencies buried deep inside massive financial reports. Numbers that technically balanced. But felt wrong. Ethan had a habit of rechecking what others skipped. That habit would make him an enemy. One evening, long after most of the office lights were off, he found it. A transfer pattern. Legal on the surface. Criminal beneath it. Money moving through shell companies. Disappearing. Returning clean. It wasn't theft. It was laundering. And it involved people far above his level. For 3 days, Ethan didn't sleep. He replayed the discovery again and again. If he ignored it, nothing would happen. His life would continue peacefully. If he reported it, someone powerful would lose everything. He chose to report it. That decision destroyed his life in less than 48 hours. The meeting was short. Too short. No questions. No investigation timeline. No legal department follow-up. Just polite nods. And a smile that never reached the eyes. 2 days later, federal agents knocked on his door. Not as witnesses. As suspects. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't threaten him. They didn't need to. The evidence was already prepared. Accounts opened in his name. Digital signatures traced to his credentials. Security footage showing him entering restricted rooms. Everything pointed to Ethan Carter. Every piece of evidence was perfect. Too perfect. He tried to explain. The agents listened. But they had already stopped hearing. When they put the cuffs on him, his fiancée stood frozen behind the door. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked at him as if he had suddenly become someone else. That look hurt more than the metal around his wrists. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The verdict took 12 minutes. Guilty. Financial fraud. Money laundering. Abuse of access. 23 years. In that moment, Ethan understood something terrifying. Truth does not protect you. Evidence does. And evidence can be manufactured. Prison erased his identity faster than the sentence. His name became a number. His future became a routine. At first, he tried to survive quietly. He kept his head down. Spoke little. Observed everything. But prison is a place that strips illusions. Especially the illusion of fairness. Within the first year, he learned who had power. Not the strongest men. Not the loudest. The ones who controlled favors. Information. Timing. Ethan started listening. He memorized patterns. Connections. Hierarchies. He learned how systems behave under pressure. And most importantly, he learned patience. Years passed. Outside, the world forgot him. Inside, something else was growing. Not anger. Anger burns too fast. This was colder. Sharper. More precise. He didn't dream of revenge. He planned it. Not with fists. Not with violence. But with the same tools that destroyed him. Time. Information. And human weakness. One night, a man sat across from him in the prison library. An older inmate. Former corporate lawyer. He looked at Ethan's notes and smiled. These numbers, the man said quietly. They're not random. Ethan didn't answer. The lawyer leaned closer. You were framed, he continued. And whoever did it is still making money. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. For the first time in years. He smiled. Because now, he knew one thing for certain. The people who destroyed him had made a fatal mistake. They assumed prison ends a man. Sometimes. It creates one. Prison does not change people overnight. It peels them. Layer by layer. Ethan learned that quickly. The first thing prison took from him was urgency. There was no rush anymore. No deadlines. No future that demanded speed. Time stretched. And in that space, his mind sharpened. The older lawyer's name was Marcus Hale. Once, Marcus had defended men whose net worths were measured in billions. Now, he counted days the same way everyone else did. But his mind still operated in another world. A world of loopholes. Of technicalities. Of invisible leverage. They began talking in fragments. Not plans. Not confessions. Patterns. Marcus explained how financial crimes rarely collapse because of morality. They collapse because of timing. Because someone moves too early. Or too late. Because someone gets impatient. Ethan listened. And he understood something crucial. The men who framed him were not geniuses. They were comfortable. Comfort makes people sloppy. Over the years, Ethan became invisible. That was intentional. In prison, attention is currency. And he refused to spend it. He worked in the library. Filed documents. Handled paperwork no one wanted. Paper leaves trails. He learned which inmates had connections outside. Which guards talked too much. Which systems quietly failed every night at the same hour. He learned how information leaked. Not through hacking. Through people. People who wanted favors. People who needed money for families they barely saw. People who hated the system but still served it. Ethan never asked for anything. That made people talk. 10 years into his sentence, a riot broke out in another wing. Ethan wasn't involved. But chaos exposes structure. During the lockdown, internal communications froze for 6 minutes. 6 minutes where logs weren't synced. 6 minutes where data could be copied without detection. Marcus noticed it. So did Ethan. They didn't speak about it. They didn't need to. Years later, Marcus died quietly in his sleep. Before he did, he left Ethan something small. A folded piece of paper. 4 names. 3 dates. 1 phrase. They think you're gone. That phrase became Ethan's anchor. Outside the prison walls, life had continued. His former firm had grown. Merged. Rebranded. The men at the top were richer now. More public. Less careful. Ethan followed everything through old newspapers, archived articles, financial magazines. He wasn't reading stories. He was mapping behavior. Who appeared together? Who disappeared after scandals? Who always landed safely? The patterns were unmistakable. The same shell companies. Different names. The same laundering structure. Evolved. Legalized. Protected. Ethan's release came without ceremony. No apology. No review. Just a stamped document and a door opening. 15 years had passed. Outside, the world felt louder. Faster. More fragile. Technology had changed. But people hadn't. Ethan walked out with nothing except memory. And patience. He didn't go back to Chicago. He didn't contact anyone from his past. That would have been emotional. And emotion ruins precision. Instead, he disappeared. For 2 years, no one knew where he was. He worked under different names. Low-level consulting. Data cleanup. Risk assessment. Jobs no one remembers. But each job taught him something new. New systems. New vulnerabilities. And then, quietly, he began rebuilding what had been stolen from him. Not his reputation. His leverage. The first move was small. A whistleblower report. Anonymous. Carefully incomplete. Just enough to trigger an internal audit at a subsidiary linked to his former firm. No accusations. Just questions. The audit found nothing serious. Publicly. Privately, something shifted. One executive resigned suddenly. Stress-related reasons. That resignation forced a replacement. The replacement changed procedures. Those changes exposed logs that had never been meant to surface. Ethan watched from a distance. He didn't celebrate. This wasn't victory. This was positioning. Because cold revenge is not about pain. It's about inevitability. And the people who destroyed Ethan were about to learn what it feels like to be trapped inside a system that no longer protects you. The first real crack appeared where no one was looking. It wasn't a headline. It wasn't an arrest. It was a delay. A routine quarterly filing, submitted 18 hours late. In the corporate world, delays don't happen by accident. Ethan noticed it immediately. The executive responsible for that filing was named Richard Vaughn. 15 years earlier, Richard had signed one of the internal approvals used to frame Ethan. At the time, he was a mid-level manager. Now, he was a senior vice president. Comfortable. Respected. Careless. Ethan didn't contact him. He didn't threaten him. Instead, Ethan did something far more dangerous. He made Richard doubt himself. Through a series of anonymous compliance inquiries, Ethan triggered small internal reviews. Nothing alarming. Nothing criminal. Just enough to create friction. Richard's inbox began to fill with polite questions. Requests for clarification. Requests for documentation. Richard answered them confidently at first. Then more arrived. From different departments. Different auditors. All referencing slightly different versions of the same transaction. Richard began staying late. He began double-checking his own work. And when people start checking, they start remembering. At the same time, Ethan fed unrelated data to a financial journalist. Again, nothing explosive. Just a pattern. The article never named Richard. But it described a senior executive whose career trajectory looked too clean. Too linear. People in the industry noticed. They always do. Richard felt it. Meetings grew colder. Conversations shorter. Trust evaporates quietly. Meanwhile, Ethan moved to the second name on Marcus's list. Elaine Morris. Legal counsel. The architect. Elaine had designed the framework that redirected blame 15 years earlier. She was brilliant. Which meant she believed she was untouchable. Ethan didn't attack her professionally. He attacked her assumptions. Using public records, Ethan reconstructed a forgotten civil case Elaine had buried early in her career. A case involving evidence suppression. The statute of limitations had passed. Legally, it was irrelevant. Ethically, it was radioactive. Ethan ensured it resurfaced in the right place. A private legal ethics forum. Closed membership. Trusted professionals. No accusations. Just a question posted under a pseudonym. Has anyone ever reviewed the Morris precedent in the 2009 Harrow case? Elaine saw it within hours. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Others did. Old colleagues. Former rivals. The past came back into the room. That night, Elaine drank alone. For the first time in years, she felt exposed. And exposure is the beginning of collapse. Ethan watched everything from a distance. He felt no satisfaction. That surprised him. Instead, he felt something else. Control. This was the difference between rage and strategy. Rage wants reaction. Strategy wants silence. Weeks passed. Then months. 2 executives quietly left the firm. No scandals. No charges. Just personal reasons. The stock price dipped. Analysts asked questions. Leadership blamed market conditions. But internally, fear spread. Someone was pulling threads. No one knew who. That uncertainty became the weapon. Ethan moved carefully. He never pushed too hard. Pressure without direction causes chaos. He wanted clarity. Then something unexpected happened. A former colleague contacted him. Sarah Lynn. She had worked alongside Ethan years ago. She had testified against him. Ethan had expected hatred. What he felt instead was curiosity. Sarah's message was simple. I don't know if this is really you. But if it is, I need to talk. Ethan stared at the screen for a long time. This wasn't part of the plan. Emotion had entered the equation. And emotion is dangerous. Sarah didn't know everything back then. She had been shown evidence. Told a story. She believed it. Just like everyone else. Now, she was seeing cracks. She had noticed the resignations. The audits. The tension. She suspected the truth. Ethan had a choice. Ignore her. Or use her. Or forgive her. Each option carried risk. He agreed to meet her. In public. During the day. No secrets. Sarah looked older. So did he. They didn't talk about the past at first. They talked about careers. About time. About how easily people disappear. Finally, she asked the question. Did you do it? Did you steal the money? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Then he said something unexpected. No. Just that. No explanation. No defense. Sarah believed him. Not because of words. Because of consistency. People who lie over-explain. People who tell the truth don't need to. Sarah told him something important. There was a fourth name. A name Marcus hadn't written down. Because 15 years ago, that man was invisible. Now, he wasn't. He was the real architect. The one who ordered everything. And he was closer to Ethan than he had ever imagined. The fourth name changed everything. Not because it was powerful, but because it was familiar. Daniel Reeve. Ethan knew that name. 15 years ago, Daniel had been invisible. No executive title. No public profile. Just a compliance strategist. A man who never appeared in meetings unless invited. A man who spoke softly and wrote perfectly worded memos. Daniel Reeve was the one who translated intent into procedure. He didn't steal money. He didn't sign approvals. He designed systems where guilt could be reassigned without fingerprints. And after Ethan's conviction, Daniel disappeared upward. Private sector. Consulting. Government advisory roles. Always near power. Never exposed to it. When Sarah said his name, Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Not anger. Recognition. Daniel had been the one person who never looked surprised during the investigation. Now Ethan understood why. Daniel hadn't framed him emotionally. He had framed him structurally. Ethan adjusted his plan. This wasn't about collapsing careers anymore. This was about forcing a man like Daniel to make a mistake. And men like Daniel only make mistakes when their logic breaks. Ethan studied him obsessively. Public speeches. White papers. Policy drafts. Daniel believed in order above all else. Not justice. Not mercy. Order. That belief had justified everything. So Ethan attacked order itself. He began introducing contradictions into Daniel's environment. Conflicting data sets. Regulatory changes arriving out of sequence. Compliance requirements that couldn't logically coexist. Nothing illegal. Just impossible. Daniel noticed. He always did. He started pushing back through back channels. Calling in favors. Asking quiet questions. Ethan anticipated each one. Every solution Daniel applied exposed a new inconsistency. The system Daniel trusted began to feel unstable. For the first time in his career, Daniel was reacting. And reaction creates traces. Sarah helped. Carefully. Reluctantly. She didn't know the full plan. She didn't want to. But she believed Ethan deserved the truth. She shared internal communications. Not leaks. Patterns. Daniel was under pressure. But still protected. Still insulated. Still safe. Ethan realized something unsettling. If he continued this way, Daniel would survive. Damaged. But free. And that wasn't enough. This was the moment Ethan had avoided thinking about. The line. Up until now, he had stayed clean. No lies. No forged evidence. No innocent casualties. But systems like Daniel's don't collapse from outside. They collapse when forced to reveal their logic publicly. Ethan needed Daniel to testify. Under oath. And for that, Daniel needed a reason. Ethan manufactured one. A legal challenge. A policy conflict tied to a federal oversight committee. Complex enough to require Daniel's expertise. Public enough to remove his shield. Daniel accepted the role confidently. He believed he could control language. Language had always protected him. The hearing began calmly. Technical. Boring. Exactly how Daniel liked it. Ethan watched remotely. Every word mattered. Then the questions shifted. Subtly. Chronology. Authorization chains. Decision frameworks. Daniel answered flawlessly. Until one question arrived out of sequence. A question Ethan had designed specifically to break the model. Daniel hesitated. Only for a second. But the silence echoed. He answered anyway. And in doing so, contradicted a statement he had made 10 minutes earlier. No one noticed. Except Ethan. And one senator. The follow-up came fast. Daniel corrected himself. But corrections create doubt. Doubt invites scrutiny. By the end of the session, Daniel was still free. Still respected. But no longer invisible. That night, Ethan sat alone. For the first time since prison, he felt exhaustion. Not physical. Moral. He could continue. He could push harder. Expose everything. Destroy Daniel completely. But he knew what that would cost. Collateral damage. Innocent people. Families. Careers that had nothing to do with him. Cold revenge demands precision. But justice demands restraint. Ethan realized something painful. He had become very good at dismantling systems. But terrible at knowing when to stop. Sarah called him that night. She sensed the shift. "You won," she said quietly. "No," Ethan replied. "I proved I wasn't crazy." There was a difference. The question now wasn't whether he could destroy Daniel Reeve. It was whether doing so would finally free him. Or turn him into the same kind of man. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear. Because for the first time, the future had opened again. And it frightened him more than prison ever did. For years, everything had been simple. Survive. Observe. Prepare. Execute. Revenge had given his life structure. Now, that structure was dissolving. Daniel Reeve was exposed enough to fall. One more push. One carefully placed disclosure. One final contradiction brought into the light. Ethan had it. He had the documents. The timelines. The internal logic that proved intent. It wouldn't just end Daniel's career. It would rewrite how the system remembered Ethan. Posthumous innocence. A quiet correction in history. But history corrections are never quiet. They come with damage. Ethan thought about prison. About men who were guilty, but not evil. About men who were innocent, but broken anyway. About Marcus. Marcus had once told him something simple. Winning doesn't always mean the other side loses. Ethan finally understood what he meant. Instead of publishing the evidence, Ethan did something no one expected. He sent it to Daniel. Privately. No threats. No demands. Just the truth. Daniel read it alone. Line by line. He recognized the structure immediately. Only one person could have assembled it this way. Ethan Carter. For the first time in decades, Daniel felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Not of prison. Of exposure. Of being seen not as a strategist. But as a coward who hid behind systems. Daniel requested a meeting. Neutral location. No lawyers. Just two men and a table. Daniel tried to control the conversation. He always did. "You want restitution," Daniel said. "Money. A settlement. A public correction." Ethan shook his head. "I want you to do one thing," he replied. "Tell the truth. On your terms. In your language." Daniel laughed softly. "That would destroy me." Ethan met his eyes. "No," he said. "It would destroy the lie you live inside." Daniel didn't respond. He didn't need to. Men like Daniel don't fear consequences. They fear loss of narrative. Weeks passed. Nothing happened. Ethan assumed Daniel had chosen silence. Then, unexpectedly, a report was released. Not explosive. Not accusatory. A procedural review. Written by Daniel Reeve himself. Buried inside it was a quiet admission. A restructuring of responsibility. No names. No drama. But enough. Enough for analysts to re-evaluate old cases. Enough for Ethan's conviction to be flagged. Not overturned. But questioned. Ethan's name appeared once. In a footnote. But that was all it took. The world didn't apologize. It never does. But it adjusted. Ethan received a letter months later. His conviction had been vacated. No compensation. No ceremony. Just a correction. Ethan felt nothing. Not joy. Not relief. Just stillness. Sarah met him for coffee. She asked him the question everyone would have asked. Do you regret not destroying him? Ethan thought carefully. If I had, he said, I would have proven the system right. He walked away from everything after that. No consulting. No exposure. Just a quiet life. People who met him later would never guess what he had endured. Or what he had controlled. But sometimes, late at night, Ethan thought about the lesson prison had taught him better than freedom ever could. Power doesn't come from destroying your enemies. It comes from deciding who you refuse to become.